Subpoint E. The writers of the 1920s are a fascinating lot. Like American literature, I think, really begins to hit its stride in the 1920s. Take, for instance, F. Scott Fitzgerald. He coins the term the Jazz Age to describe the 1920s. But he does so kind of revealing the negative side of the gaiety and freedom that seemed like, the 1920s were exciting. It's jazz and flappers, but, there's wealth and excitement. But he also makes a case that, like, people...
All right, this isn't going to be our longest small group meeting. This is actually just a get to familiarize yourself with where you are going to small group and your small group leader. If right now the girls from Benedict, Catherine, and Gianna Mola could head down to the gym, that would be great. Thank you, thank you.
In Subpoint E, I want to talk about the writers of the 1920s. I think this is really when American literature begins to really hit its stride. Take, for instance, F. Scott Fitzgerald. F. Scott Fitzgerald, his most famous work is The Great Gatsby. And essentially, every high schooler in America reads The Great Gatsby. It's like maybe the American novel. But he coins the term the Jazz Age to describe the 1920s. And it's a term you'll still hear today. The 1920s are all about, this gaiety and the freedom and everybody's rich and there's flappers and jazz and isn't this wonderful? But I think Fitzgerald understood in a way that it's very, very clear-headed that for all of the excitement, for all of the joy, there's a sense that something is wrong or something that's missing or that it's kind of like the old Gilded Age, that you just scrape the surface.
All right, if you are a girl and Gregory, JP2, Peter, or Padre Pio, go ahead and head on down to the gym. Thank you.
In some way, I want to talk about writers of the 1920s. And I think this is kind of when American literature begins to really hit its stride. Take, for instance, the story of F. Scott Fitzgerald. F. Scott Fitzgerald is the author of The Great Gatsby, maybe the American novel. I think essentially every American high schooler reads The Great Gatsby at some point in their high school career. It's like the book, right? And he gives us the term the Jazz Age to describe the 1920s. It's still a term you'll hear used today. And I think F. Scott Fitzgerald understood, maybe better than most, that while the Jazz Age is about flappers and jazz, and this is great, and the economy's doing well, and it's life's a party, there's also kind of like
all right, Mother Teresa girls, and let's go ahead and have Mother Teresa boys, Padre Pio boys, Peter boys head down to the gym. Thank you.
Take 4. In Subpoint C, I want to talk about the writers of the 1920s. And I think this is really when American literature begins to hit its stride. Take, for instance, F. Scott Fitzgerald. F. Scott Fitzgerald is the author of The Great Gatsby, which is like the American novel. The basis of The Great Gatsby is that there's this, probably a bootlegger, probably organized crime. He gets super rich, but he never gets the thing he wants. And that's the love of his life. And it's essentially this long novel about trying to steal somebody else's wife. And despite its racy premise, it's taught in essentially every American high school today. And it's something that essentially every American reads at some, or is assigned to read at some point in their life. He gives us the term the Jazz Age to describe the Roaring '20s. Because this is still a term you'll hear today. I think F. Scott Fitzgerald understands that while the Roaring '20s are a time of excitement and economic expansion, and people are getting rich, and there's like flappers and jazz, and isn't this great? There's also a sense of like brokenness and tarnish to it that just doesn't.
All right, and if you are still in your small group room, go ahead and head down to the gym. Thank you.